for attending today. You all know me. There's nobody online that we don't know. So I'm Simon Carswell. It says there, welcome everybody now. I've already done. We'll be using the webcasting system. Committee members and key officers are physically present in this room. The agenda pack is available via mod.gov, which I assume you've all read. When you're invited to speak, could you clearly state who you are for the benefit of anybody who's listening to the meeting so they can identify who is speaking? I suppose it's recorded as well, so if somebody who wanted to watch it later, they should know. The meeting is being recorded. Finally, as agenda is now viewed electronically, could I kindly request members and officers refer to page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information. And we have apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Marcus Gravis, Councillor Martin Lovell, Councillor Lance Doddridge, Councillor Mike Murphy and Councillor Tom Power.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting. To confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of April. I assume everybody's read the minutes. Are there any queries on it, or can we have a proposer? Tony's proposing. Yeah. And Peter seconding. All those in favour? Thank you. You weren't there, Brian, were you? No. Okay. Good. Declarations of interest, anything apart from what we already have recorded? No. Thank you. Public question time. There are no members of the public. Hackney carriage and private hire licensing. John, do you want to introduce the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Am I coming through loud and clear? Yeah, great. Good afternoon, everyone. At the last meeting, there was a request for a report on driver training, sort of specifically to do with safeguarding. So what I've taken the liberty of doing, I hope you don't mind, is provide a more wide-ranging update on sort of where we are with our taxi and private hire licensing policy and the sort of process of harmonising that. And I have as well provided some initial comments on how perhaps we might approach safeguarding training in future, because we're not quite all doing the same at the moment within our 5 zones. In summary, the aim is to actually have an entire policy out for consultation with the trade and wider public before the end of the year, and that would include some proposals for safeguarding training. So my hope is to kind of do it all together. There is an exception to that in relation to the accessibility side of things and determining vehicle specifications, because that relies on a plan of its own. But other than that, like I say, in the not too distant future, I hope to have some proposals on everything, including safeguarding training. So that's it from as far as my introduction goes. But I'm interested to hear what you think, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Do we have any idea of timeline? I know that's difficult to say as to when we might have something
for implementation, or
for the consolidation of the policies.
I've got a draft document on the go as we speak, which is nearing completion, and that's why I'm confident that before the year is out, it should be out for consultation. That we would have quite how long that consultation is. I think the council's guidelines are 8 weeks minimum. It's quite a massive change for the area. I mean, for the fact that obviously we've got 5 different zones with different approaches at the moment, that in itself is a change going into one. But I'm sure some of the arrangements that we end up with will be quite different to those we've already got. So it does merit a decent consultation. But yeah, the actual draft policy itself is fairly near completion. So obviously, once we've done the consultation, we need to review the responses. You'll need to see those. So perhaps in the early part of 2025, maybe. I don't know.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, John. My question really is around accessibility, and I can only speak from the former authority that I was with, and I know we had a percentage that we were aiming to hit overall for accessible vehicles. Have you any idea at the moment, and I know this is ongoing work, but have you any idea at the moment where you're going to want to kind of pitch that? Because we have seen instances where we've had operators come back to us and apply differently for that because of the cost of the vehicles and how that kind of works together. So if you could give me just a little bit on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Drop my pen in. So you're right. In terms of accessibility, like with most of the other things, there are different rules in each of the zones at the moment. The minimum is 25% in the south area of the total number of licensed Hackney carriages or taxis, whichever you want to call them. Which way will we go? Well, it's really, really difficult to say. The reason I'm suggesting that we actually sort of, if you like, harmonise the whole policy and then take the accessibility side out is because that accessibility bit relies on, assuming that we follow the Department for Transport's best practice guidance. I mean, why wouldn't we? That they are saying that licensing authorities should write an inclusive service plan in which they consult with the wider public and understand the actual, demand and need in their area before they then set the policy to sort of ensure that need is met. So there's a few different if you like, recommendations in that guidance, things that councils could do to sort of incentivise their uptake. But I must admit, in the past, it's sort of been tempting to think, well, perhaps if we went fully wheelchair accessible, that might, if you like, solve the problem. Because I know that we do hear occasionally from people in the local area who have difficulty obtaining accessible transport. But the guidance does indicate that actually wheelchair accessible vehicles aren't suitable for people dependent on their own needs. So there isn't a, if you like, magic bullet answer. There's no one vehicle that is universally accessible. So it's going to be quite tricky to get the balance right. I've indicated in the report that Scrutiny for Communities has asked for a report on this kind of particular subject. I know Councillor Johnson, who's local to the Taunton area, gets quite a bit of feedback from members of the community. They're having issues. So I'm going to be providing them with some information about what we might need to do in sort of because this inclusive service plan is going to take some time to prepare. What we're trying to do at the moment, particularly in Taunton, certainly where we've had some concerns raised by members of the public about a lack of accessible transport, is we are trying to drum up some interest from vehicle proprietors in them having their contact details listed on our Equalities Act register of wheelchair accessible vehicles, because we've got to have a register by law, which we've got, but it's not a great deal of use if there aren't contact details on there. Because great, I can see that so and so has a Ford Tourneo, and that's great for me, but how do I reach that person? And obviously not all members of the trade are really visible on Facebook and Google and things like that. So I think part of the issue is getting the people that actually need them in touch with the people who've actually got the vehicles. So one of the things we're doing at the moment is, like I say, we've reached out to the trade and we're trying to improve those lists, try and get a few more people sort of buying into that, seeing obviously the positives from having their details on there. So we've got a few more in the Taunton area. We've had some anecdotal reports from people in the Yeovil area as well, similar. So that'll be another area where we'll try and drum up some interest. So those are just some things we can do in the short term. But there's all sorts of things that we could do in the policy to try and control the level of accessible transport. But it's difficult to tell which ones are going to work. So I think it really does need you know, a lot of time and preparation and effort to get that right. I hope that answers the question.
Apologies. Just following on from that, I can understand where Andy's coming from with the percentage of wheelchair accessible taxis, because, and I appreciate what the officer said, because there's got to be a balance here, because you could, there have been known instances where drivers, their businesses could be put out of business because they cannot afford the wheelchair accessible taxis and what have you. So you've got to have that balance. You cannot say you must, and there's a fine balance to be had there. But there's something else I want to raise as well. On the report, it's 3.10, and I'm going to be careful what I say here, because it's been raised in confidential session before by this committee. I am still not happy with what's being proposed with the training for drivers in the light of what has come, a report had come before this committee in the past about a subcommittee matter which we had to deal with. And that's all I will say in open session. Okay? And I think you know what I mean, Chairman.
Yes, Tony. Do you want to comment, John, without mentioning any specifics?
Well, it's a bit tricky because I'm not quite clear on which concerns Councillor Locke's referring to. I mean, quite happy to have a conversation after the meeting's finished. I may have an inkling, but I don't want to get it wrong. But I mean, at this stage, obviously, we haven't settled on anything. So if it's in relation to the format of the training, then you know, we're still in the sort of process of identifying options, and particularly in light of the council's restructure and transformation programme, that obviously plays a part in what we think we can deliver in the future. But happy to, yeah, well, you know, I'll hand it back to Councillor Locke.
Well, I will, I won't use names and what have you, but I mean, it's quite obvious because you were sat here and quite a lot was said about it. And I think you know which application I'm referring to and what area I'm referring to in your nodding. And I am definitely not happy with that report. I believe it is face-to-face training which is needed, because I've done some research and got information which I shared with the committee from another authority of their procedures for training drivers, or the drivers being trained, or the company who they work for doing the training and that. And for all three members who sat on the particular panel, subcommittee chairman, as you know, were really concerned about the level of training and some of the answers which we had from the hearing, which we were sitting in judgment on, and we felt very uncomfortable. And no, I'm not happy with that at all, be it done with outside providers. It needs to be in-house. I'm sorry. And it needs to be face-to-face for us to be 100% satisfied that if we're making decisions on particular hearings, that we are making the right judgment. Thank you.
And I think I just add that, I mean, we all appreciate transformations happening at the moment, but when it comes to safeguarding, costs shouldn't come into it really when we're talking about looking after passengers. So, yeah. Hugh.
Chair, I'm really disappointed. I've come here. There's a good few of us here, but why are we frightened of not going in the confidential session? But we're here to do the job. I say, why don't we go into confidential session? You know, why are you holding back? You know, we either want an answer. You're gobbling on about what you were on, and I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. We're the committee. We got to know what's happening. And the other question to put, Chair, is, are we making any checks on taxis at all? Do we go out and do any checking? Spot checks or anything?
We're talking mechanically now, Hugh.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to go in confidential session necessarily this afternoon, but John, do you want to comment on any of that, including the mechanical checks of taxis?
Yeah, so those sorts of particularly mechanical ones rely on support from the DVSA. Hopefully I've got the acronym correct, and the police. They are infrequent because, like us, they have competing work pressures. So we do them, but they're sporadic. I can't think off the top of my head of the last one that we've done, but we're, because they are effective. And we get a lot of bang for our buck. Yes, we do. We are, keen to do those.
And I assume that members of the public can report in if they're not happy about the condition of a taxi they've been in.
Yes, of course. We encourage the public, including the trade, to report any concerns that they've got, which are all followed up. We might not be necessarily proactive in checking the various standards, but we are definitely reactive. And as I say, we'll follow up and investigate any concerns. And obviously, if and we find anyone failing to meet the standards, then we'll deal with that.
Thank you. Does anybody want to have a follow-up question? Tony?
Sorry to prolong this, but I want to follow back to what Councillor Davis has said. The report from that subcommittee has not come back fully to this committee yet, as you alluded to here. And there was a lot of confidential information within that report. So when I say that it's confidential, and I won't say anything now, whether we're a committee or what have you, there are certain things which we have to abide by, and confidentiality is one of those things where names and children are concerned with. And that is it. And it'll be interesting when the report comes out, because the officer does know what I'm taking on. Councillor Saunton knows, and I did bring a report back to this authority a little while ago, not so long ago actually, on that particular item, because we asked for an item to be put onto this agenda to discuss the training of taxi and private hire drivers, of which was in open session, that part of it. Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Chair. I just thought it might be helpful if I did sort of expand a little bit without encroaching on anything sensitive. I think there's no harm in saying that we had a subcommittee where the panel were convened to determine the fitness and propriety of an individual who was a licensed hand-carriage private hire driver, and also they were providing school transport. And there was a concern because they had been issued with some training material by the school transport section on how they should behave and safeguarding in general. And that was done in the written form, and the driver in question claimed to have no knowledge. So of course we then had a debate about what training was appropriate and the best way of delivering that. So sorry, I just thought I'd chip in there because it might add a little bit more context to the discussion.
Thank you. And I think one of the issues is that we're working across licensing, school transport and children and families. And I did raise it, children and families, when I was last at scrutiny. But thank you for raising that, Tony. Hopefully that can be, we can come to whether we have to go into closed session in the future about this. We can do once we've got the relevant report.
As you said, Chairman, the cost doesn't come into it when it's safeguarding children. Thank you.
Absolutely. Do you have any other questions for John? You look like you're going to raise your hand there, Brian, but then subtly impede him. Okay. Thank you. That report is for noting only. Thank you very much. We now move on to minutes of the previous licensing and regulatory subcommittees, which I assume everybody's read. Is there anything it wants to raise from those, or can we have a proposer to accept them? Peter?
Yeah, I'll second it, but can I also ask a question on it? When is the report on the committee, which we've just been talking about, going to be come back to this committee?
We're looking at the next meeting, I think, aren't we, John? Next meeting. Okay, thank you. So we've had a proposer and a seconder. You've got those. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, well, it says we're there for noting anyway. Okay. That seems too quick, really. But okay, meeting closed. Thank you very much all for attending.